Hey YouTube, what is up and welcome to our first complete guide on Taric. My name is King Taric and I'm a Master 1 Taric main in NA. Today we will be talking about why and when to pick Taric, what to take on him, and how to play the King of Gems in Season 8. If you want to skip to any particular section of the video, timestamps are in the description below. So let's get right into the video. So why should you play Taric? More importantly than anything else, he's a blast to play. Although he's generally played support, Taric feels like a really impactful champion when you pick him. You have the potential to 1v1 the enemy AD carry in the early game, and make your entire team invincible in the late game. All in all, he's a really fun champion, and I highly recommend you try him out. So the good stuff about playing Taric. Taric is a champion with an insanely strong, if not the strongest, late game of any support. He has strong area of effect heals, area of effect stuns, and an ability that essentially doubles these two zones. And if he stays in combat and keeps proccing his passive, Taric can continuously spam these abilities. This alone makes Taric a considerably strong healing and CC threat in the mid to late game. But more importantly, Taric's ultimate can single-handedly win teamfights. His ultimate, Cosmic Radiance, creates a zone, making any allies within it, when it activates, invincible for 2.5 seconds. And with a second zone created from Taric's W, Bastion, with a clump team, he can easily grant invulnerability to 3 or even all 4 teammates. The only thing holding Taric back from being completely busted is the fact that his ultimate has a 2.5 second delay before getting its effects off. But nevertheless, Taric can simultaneously make his frontline and carries unkillable, and can turn otherwise lost games around with this single ability. As expected of a Warden and Enchanter class support, Taric is also exceptionally good at peeling carries. He can throw out a stun from both himself and his carry, and if he stays in combat and applies his passive, can keep casting his Q for continuous healing. He can also counter full AD team comps because of the passive on his Bastion, which grants bonus armor to his linked teammate based on Taric's bonus armor. While the buff may be slow to ramp up with the lower gold income of supports, if you opt in building a couple armor items, it can make your carries annoyingly tanky for the enemy team in the later stages of the game. Of course, Taric has several glaring weaknesses that balance out his otherwise strong kit. So far, I've been praising Taric's fantastic late game and team fighting potential, but in lane, Taric is a mediocre pick at best. It is really matchup dependent, but he can have anywhere from a decent lane to one where he really struggles to survive the laning phase. Taric especially struggles against poke lanes and mobile champions, since it is difficult to land your dazzle on them. We'll go over a more in-depth overview on what specific playstyles and champions counter Taric later in the video. Taric also suffers from extremely telegraphed abilities. This basically means that the enemy team can see his abilities coming well in advance, and therefore have plenty of time to react to them. This is especially evident with his E, Dazzle, which creates a 1 second delayed stun zone in front of him, and his ult, which takes 2.5 seconds to actually go off. While Taric's abilities have huge potential, especially since they're all AoE, they also have a lot of counterplay to balance them out. Taric relies on team communication to have the most effectiveness. If your team doesn't engage when you ult, for example, you can easily burn a really valuable ability. So when playing Taric, make sure to shot call for your team and tell them when to go in or disengage, pings or whatever you need to get your team to actually know what to do. Finally, Taric has some minor mana issues in the laning phase. Since his Q has essentially no cooldown when he's auto-attacking, Taric can easily burn through his entire mana pool for just a moderate increase in health. When playing Taric, you have to be cautious to not spam your heals more than necessary, or else you'll run out of mana really quickly, especially in the lane. For Taric support, I take 2 main mastery pages, mainly dependent upon the champion matchup. For this video, I'm just going to go over what pages I take, because in this rune system, where there are actually interactive choices for each champion, I could take up this entire video rambling about each individual rune choice. But if you are interested in a more in-depth and detailed explanation on the Season 8 runes that Taric can take, I highly recommend that you check out my previous guide video explaining my thought processes behind each of these choices. The link for that is in the description below. So the main mastery page I take is an Inspiration Resolve page, with the keystone Glacial Augment. While Glacial is generally seen as an unconventional and a niche pick, I found that it is fantastic on Taric. It helps Taric with 2 issues in his kit, laning Dazzle and chasing enemy champions. The slow makes Dazzle a much more reliable ability, and helps him land it on anyone that is right up in his face. This makes it especially good against melee supports, but not as reliable against the ranged poke kind of supports. Glacial Augment also synergizes with the Approach Velocity and Font of Life runes, which overall creates a surprisingly strong combination. For someone who has a somewhat aggressive playstyle, I find this rune page to be the best on Taric. Of course, you won't be able to always get right on top of enemy champions in the harder matchups, and in most cases, you'll instead be sitting under tower hoping to get out of laning phase already. This is when I pick my secondary rune page, a Resolve Domination page. Instead of helping Taric's weaknesses with the Glacial Augment setup, this rune page assumes laning phase is either going to be passive or really difficult to win, and instead focuses on amplifying Taric's strengths to hopefully win the late game. This page also takes advantage of Zombie Ward and Ingenious Hunter, which are both insane on supports for providing vision and item CDR. However, this page is not going to help Taric out as much in lane, but it can at least be useful against the obnoxious Janna or Zyra matchups that you can't really use Glacial Augment effectively with. Summoner spells in Taric are going to be relatively straightforward. Like for virtually every other champion, Taric is pretty much required to take Flash. It's a valuable escape, reposition, and a great setup for the spicy Flash Dazzle combos. The main choice here is between Exhaust and Ignite. In general, Exhaust is the better all-around summoner spell because it has decent offensive and defensive use. That's kind of why you see it on most supports in general. But in a really aggressive lane, or in a lane against a really heavy healing champion, such as Soraka, it is usually more valuable having Ignite for the early game presence, or the Grievous wounds. So now let's get into Taric's abilities. Starting things off, we have Taric's bread and butter, the core part of ability combos, and the reason why he does such an absurd amount of damage, Bravado, Taric's passive. Basically, every single time Taric casts an ability, he gains 2 empowered auto attacks. These autos grant a huge increase in attack speed and also deal bonus magic damage, scaling with Taric's armor. Also, they reduce the cooldowns of Taric's abilities. While Bravado isn't an active ability, it's definitely worth talking about because Taric's entire ability combos revolve around it. Most of the time when you cast an ability, you are going to want to auto attack twice before using another ability. This conserves mana, which Taric can burn through really quickly, as well as maximizing his DPS that his passive provides. If you cycle through your abilities efficiently, you can often use Dazzle twice in a trade, which is really important for winning those extended trades. Also, in those teamfights where I can't get close enough to auto attack to proc Bravado, I often find myself sneaking in an auto attack on minions just to get my abilities back up quicker. Next up, we have Taric's Q, Starlight's Touch. If you are coming to Taric from an Enchanter support background, you are going to find this ability to have an extremely underwhelming heal. And that's totally true. Without 4 or 5 stacks, the heal from this ability is mediocre at best, even for being AoE. But the strength in this ability lies in its absurd uptime. Taric regenerates stacks of Starlight's Touch really slowly, taking up to 15 seconds just to get a single charge of the ability. But in combination with Bravado, every single time Taric auto-attacks with his passive active, he gains 1 stack of his Q. This allows Taric to continuously use his Q as long as he is in combat. And pretty much unlike any other champion, Taric can combo with as little as just his Q. When your other abilities are on cooldown, you can Q, auto, Q, auto indefinitely, as long as you have mana. This helps you deal more damage, gets your other abilities off cooldown, and of course, heals you every time you cast it. Because of this, Taric's health is in a way tied to his mana. It is tempting to heal as much as possible, but be careful. You will run out of mana really quickly if you spam this ability too much. Taric's W ability is Bastion, a skill with both the passive and an active effect. When you activate it, you become linked to a target ally, granting a decently sized shield to both Taric and the teammate. The passive effect of Bastion is an armor buff for Taric and his ally that scales with Taric's bonus armor. This is fairly helpful against lethality or full AD team comps, although a significant armor buff doesn't really kick in until you get a few items. However, the real kicker with this ability is the fact that every other one of your abilities are also casted from your linked ally's location. This means a second zone of healing, a second zone of stuns, and a second zone of invulnerability that all get cast in your target's location. The effects don't stack though. For example, if you double heal or double stun a champion, the effect only applies once. But you still have a much bigger effective range and area of effect in your other abilities when Bastion's link is being used. A big question with the use of Bastion is whether to use it on your carry to peel, or use it on your frontline to help engage. I may look to cover this in more detail in a future video, but the short answer is that it depends. It's totally situational, and varies based on who is fed and the positioning in the team fight. In general, I would say that if your carry can be quickly assassinated, it's best to keep it on them the whole time. Otherwise, try to stay on the opposite side of the team from where your Bastion is. If your W is on the tanks, stay by your carries to ult them, and if your W is on the carries, make sure your front line is staying alive. Taric's E is his only form of crowd control, Dazzle. Activating Dazzle creates an area of effect zone attached to Taric, towards a cursor that channels for a second, then stuns all units in that AoE. Dazzle is not a projectile, so it will pass through all units it hits, and will not be affected by Yasuo's Windwall or Braum's Unbreakable. Of course, Dazzle is particularly hard to hit because of the 1 second delay. Because the ability is so telegraphed, enemies will usually attempt to dodge it somehow. They will usually try to dodge to the side by walking perpendicular to the animation. To consistently land Dazzle, you're going to have to walk with the enemy champion, or basically follow their movements so that they stay within the stun area. An even more advanced method of landing Dazzle is to not initially aim the stun right away at the opponent, but walk towards the enemy and trap them in a position where they can't dodge it. This strategy works best against a wall, but it really can be used anywhere as long as the enemy champion is the direction that they are attempting to go in. Here's one clip I particularly like. It really illustrates how to not directly aim Dazzle at the opponent, but instead force him to dodge in the direction that I walk in. Here, I force Twitch into walking into the wall because I aim the Dazzle where he wants to go, and then follow him and hit him anyway. The nuances and different strategies to land Dazzle might be a topic for a different video, but I hope the brief explanation helps give a sense on how to use the ability. Finally, we have Taric's ultimate ability, Cosmic Radiance. This rather overpowered ultimate creates an area around Taric and his Bastion buddy that after 2.5 seconds grants invulnerability to any allies inside of it. I kinda already explained how to use this ability, and it's pretty self-explanatory anyway. Keep teammates alive. The main mistakes many Taric players make with their R is casting it either too early or too late. Too early, and the enemy disengages during the duration where your teammates are invincible, and is completely wasted. Too late, and your teammates are already dying before it even goes off. While not every cast will be the perfect teamfight winning ability, the general rule of when to cast it is when both sides are committed to the fight. What I mean by this is that when the enemy team cannot easily disengage when you use your ult, you should cast it so you can get as much value out of the invulnerability as possible. So now that we've gone over Taric's abilities and how to best use them, let's talk about what order to take them in. Obviously, you're going to want to put points in Cosmic Radiance as much as possible to get the cooldown lowered. Other than that, I max my E first, followed by Q and W. I find that getting points in Dazzle is the most effective, because of the lowered cooldown and the extra damage that helps in the landing phase. If I'm really behind, I may take up to 4 points or so in my Q before I start maxing E, just for the burst healing. But in almost all cases, maxing E first is the way to go. To start off the landing phase, I take my E, W, then Q. However, even though you max Dazzle first, Taric still needs a second point in his Q level 4. This is because Taric's passive empowers 2 attacks. If he uses both stacks and autos twice, he gets potentially 2 stacks of his Q. So, getting a second point in Q enables Taric to be a lot more efficient when using his Q, because it basically does twice as much healing as a Q with only 1 point. Now that we've gone over the basics of Taric's kit, what do we build on him? Taric best starts off the laning phase with Relic Shield and 3 pots. While Inching Coin used to be a thing in the Ardent meta, its less useful stats and lack of lane sustain make it a lot worse than Relic and Taric currently. For boots, I either take Merc Treads, Ninja Tabai, or Boots of Lucidity. Boot choices are pretty self-explanatory. Mercs when there are abundant CC or magic damage, Ninja Tabai against AD threats, and CDR boots if neither are the case and I'm fairly fed. I don't build Mobies because I take the magical boots mastery in the inspiration tree, which gives me boots of speed for free 10 minutes into the game. By this time, Mobies will kind of have lost a lot of its relative power because the laning phase is already ending, so I don't really end up building them in my games. Taric's core build is Face of the Mountain, Sightstone, and Locket. Face of the Mountain is pretty standard because it's your upgraded Relic Shield, and it also procs Glacial Augment. Sightstone is also standard for support because Vision is pretty OP. You can build Eye of the Equinox here, but I prefer Face of the Mountain because it works with Glacial Augment. But the reason I always build Locket is because it works so well with Taric's ultimate. If you activate Cosmic Radiance at the right time, or on the later side, enemies will often try to burst your allies before the ult goes off. This is where the instant AoE shield from Locket comes in. Locket helps protect allies before they go invulnerable. Ardent Tensor and Knight's Vow are arguably the 2 next most important items in Taric, and I may sometimes build one or both of these items before lock it, depending on the game. Taric can apply Ardent Sensor to all 5 team members in one queue, so that provides a ton of value, but it makes Taric a bit squishier. Meanwhile, Knight's Vow is just a great support choice, and not to mention, it provides all the stats that Taric could ever need: health, armor, and CDR. The rest of the items on this list can be built totally depending on what you or the team needs. Support items like Redemption and Deeks Convergence can be helpful in the late game. Meanwhile, items like Frozen Heart and maybe Righteous Glory get you armor, and Spirit Visage and Adaptive Helm get you magic resist. So now that we've gotten Taric's abilities and what to take on him all out of the way, how do you play him in the laning phase? The laning phase is definitely the toughest part of the game for Taric, but that's good because it actually isn't as weak as it seems. Taric has unexpectedly strong counter engage, even in lane. When an engaged champion like Leona or Thresh jumps in her AD carry, throw out an E and stun them in return. If they continue to fight, keep cycling your passive to out-trade them in the long run. And sometimes, instead of fully committing to peel, I just walk up to the enemy AD carry myself and 1v1 them to keep them from attacking my carry. If he has mana, Taric has the potential to actually take that fight and beat the AD carry 100-0. And here's just a few tips and tricks for the laning phase. When trading, auto-attack before or as you begin to channel your Dazzle. This will slow the enemy because of Glacial Augment and greatly help you land the ability. If you're against a lane that attacks from too far away to actually engage on, or if your AD carry is pretty weak in the early game, call your jungler to help out. If he doesn't, well, prepare to chill out and farm for the mid game. Don't worry, you should outscale an even lane anyway. On the other hand, Taric shines in the late game and especially during teamfights. But what he should do isn't necessarily straightforward. Taric generally has the options to either engage, preferably with another main tank, or stay with his carries and peel them. Much of the time, I like to W and ult the tanks if we are engaging on them, but if they are engaging on us, I stay closer to my carries to keep them alive. If there is a major assassination attempt on your carries, always stick by them. Otherwise, feel free to move around and find where you're getting the most value in fights. You are in a main tank, so be wary if you are on the front line for your team. Also, be sure to keep auto-attacking and using your passive to keep your abilities up. While Taric goes well with most AD carries, I found that he has the most synergy with Kalista, Draven, Twitch, and Ezreal. Kalista and Draven are the kinds of AD carries that have insane lane pressure, and Kalista especially can always threaten an all-in. This helps compensate for Taric's kind of lackluster laning phase, as these champions can pressure the all-ins that Taric is best at. They also stay in close combat to deal their damage, which works well with Taric's in-their-faces playstyle and ultimate. Twitch represents the more scaling, late-game oriented AD carry. He isn't as high up in synergy as Kalista or Draven, because Twitch and Taric, and other late-game AD carries like Kog'Maw, have a pretty weak laning phase. But if you survive that, Taric is fantastic at peeling for a hyper carry in the late game and keeping them alive. Twitch is especially good because it can also stun the enemy through his camouflage. Finally, we have Ezreal. Taric and Ezreal go way back. They are a truly outrageous duo in the bot lane. Unfortunately, Taric has his fair share of counterpicks and bad matchups. His hardest matchup, and unsurprisingly the lowest matchup win rate for Taric, is Janna. Janna basically negates everything Taric tries to do. Taric tries to get an E range to engage? Nope. Taric makes his entire team invulnerable and wants to get on the enemy team? Nope. Janna is the queen of disengage, and this takes a lot of value out of the Taric pick. Taric's other main type of support counter are the lane bullies. These usually consist of ranged poke mages, such as Zyra or Brand. While Taric can still do well if he makes it to the late game, these champions make it really difficult for him to survive laning phase and get there. While I wouldn't consider any AD carry picks Taric counters, the harder matchups are definitely the ones against mobile AD carries, such as Ezreal or Xayah when she ults. Plus, Ezreal counters Taric E because he can dazzle Taric with his beauty. That basically wraps up the content of the guide. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please let me know other types of guides or videos you would like me to make in the future in the comments below. I really hope this guide inspires you to maybe give Taric a chance. Well, that's all for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.